Hi there, I'm Leanne Vanderputten, mother of 11, grandmother of 45 and counting, from Finer Femininity, where I share with you tidbits of old-fashioned goodness and wholesomeness to help us on the path to being joyful, traditional, feminine Catholic women. Today our article is from a book called Marriage Before and After, and it is written by the Reverend Robert Nash, and it was written in 1952. It has the nihil obstat and the imprimatur. Our article today is called After the Honeymoon. Our notes so far have been drawn up for those who are contemplating marriage. We have now arrived at a further stage when we think of the happy pair returning from the honeymoon, met by rapturous friends and escorted from the railway to be inducted into the great purpose of their vocation, the founding and building up of a home. Home, sweet home. Home, the first thought we would like to put before them at this moment is that our divine Lord spent by far the greater part of his sojourn on earth at home. 30 years at Nazareth with Mary, his mother, and a considerable number of these with Joseph, his foster father, and only 3 in the eye of the public. We might suggest a reason, very apt for the young couple about to begin married life. Jesus came into the world not merely to save us from sin and open heaven for us, but also to live a life which would serve as a perfect model of what our own lives should be. Now, the greater number of men and women are intended by him to marry and found a home and rear a family. So it would seem as if, with that fact in his divine mind, he chose to spend the most of his life in his home, so as to emphasize the importance of home life, and to show men and women how to live it. If there is chaos in the world at this moment, the reason is, in very large measure, because Christ's enemies have succeeded in breaking up the home. Man has become a mere cog in a machine, a tool of the state, with no other purpose than to build up the state whose property he is, in much the same way as the ant contributes to the raising of an anthill, or the bee works in harmony with other bees for the management of the hive. That materialistic philosophy of life is broadcast on every side. The vocation of the Catholic married couple is to oppose it tooth and nail by cooperating with each other and with God for the founding of the home and the raising of the home according to true Christian principles. And what are these? When you visit the perfect home at Nazareth, you find in the first place that the bond of love and union is firmly maintained there. There is beauty all around when there's love at home. There is joy in every sound when there's love at home. But that union and that love are not just going to happen in your home. They need to be assiduously and systematically developed. And here I would like to revert for a moment to what we have said about marriage being a vocation from God. If the young man and woman have been careful to beg for divine guidance in their choice, if they have considered duly the sacredness of their calling, if their company-keeping had been such as has won the blessing of Mary Immaculate, if, in a word, they have prepared on right lines, they have now, on embarking on this great adventure, an immense source of solid consolation, and a very comforting assurance upon which they can rely. Our vocation. For when trials come, when they tend to tire a little of each other, when the human frailties begin to rise to the surface, which are the heritage of all sons and daughters of Adam, when sickness throws its shadow, or financial worries eat into the heart, in a word, when the cross is presented to them to bear, it must surely be a source of much courage and strength to be able to recognize that they are placed in these circumstances just because God has willed it so. They haven't forestalled him. They haven't rushed in a gust of passion into this state. They know God wills this marriage, and with it the trials which will sanctify it and help to unite them. The priest or religious can say to himself or herself, I am here because he has chosen me for this sort of life, with whatever sacrifice it entails, and especially with this particular trial which weighs most heavily at the moment. In much the same way, married people who preserve the Christian outlook during courtship and after can derive immense comfort and courage when they bring home to themselves that this comes straight to them from the hand of the Heavenly Father. And of course, there are ways and means of fostering this union and love which are so essential. I would say, first of all, that in every family there must be a spirit of readiness to give and take. Dear husband, do not see all her little faults and be continually hauling her over the coals. Dear wife, feign a little deafness now and then and refuse to hear when the storm is blowing. A blind eye and a deaf ear may be a source of considerable inconvenience in many circumstances, but they are an invaluable and indeed an indispensable help to him or to her who has to live in a family. Give and take. This is true of even a religious family. I had nearly said especially true here, of a community of men or women whose whole lives are consecrated irrevocably to God's service, and whose ideals and ways of life are cast very much in the same mold. Even here there is needed much of the give and take spirit. Allowances have to be made for individuality of character, for different grades of talents, for more or less of initiative, of health, of interests, of zeal. Difficulties have to be tactfully tided over. Differences have to be unobtrusively sunk. Let an ordinary rank and file member of that religious family try to force others into his way of acting. Let him insist on taking for himself all the currants out of the community cake. Let him show an habitual intolerance for the views of others, and I'm giving away no secrets when I tell you he is going to prove himself a serious menace to the harmony and union of those who live with him. A concrete example may serve best of all to drive home the principle of the need of this give and take spirit. They weren't hitting it off too well, this husband and wife, and when the priest called and tried to restore the peace, he was treated to a lengthy diatribe from each in turn on the iniquities of the other. And how did this trouble begin? It transpired that some 3 weeks earlier the wife was kneeling at the fireplace, making violent but abortive efforts to get the fire going for the breakfast. And he paced up and down the floor with the regularity of a policeman on his beat, famished, as he explained, for it was freezing, cold November weather. At last he expostulated and proceeded to tell her she knew nothing about making a fire. Let him at it, and he will guarantee to have the kettle boiling in 10 minutes. Fatal words. For forthwith the lady arose with becoming dignity, glanced at the clock, which was pointing to 10 minutes to 8, and without a word took to the floor upon her husband's deserted beat. Meantime he had gone on his knees. Paper was torn up and sticks and turf broken into small pieces. 7 matches were struck, as the lady subsequently averred, and half a pint of paraffin was poured out in libation on the unimpeachable testimony of the same eyewitness. But fire? No, fire there was none, and presently the old clock on the stairs rang out in mocking tones the message to the world that it was 8 in the morning. Perhaps you can supply the remarks that followed. Tact. Now, the point of the anecdote is, of course, that this was a clear case where what was wanted was a blind eye and a deaf ear. If he, instead of exploding, had offered to go out and get a little dry turf and had added that nobody could be expected to have a fire going under such obvious disadvantages, if she had told him that she felt so sorry to keep him waiting, and knowing the hard day's work he had before him, well, what then? I'm willing to take a bet that he might have thawed, even in the freezing temperature of a fireless kitchen on a November morning. But could you make her say her piece, or get him to smile good-humoredly? We who hear of the little episode will probably smile at it ourselves, but it is worthwhile keeping it in mind when the difficulties begin to appear which make it hard for people to bear each other's burdens of family life. Most of us, I suppose, have heard complaints from time to time by wife about husband, and by husband about wife. Undoubtedly, there are many occasions wherein such complaints are fully justified. There are husbands who squander their earnings on drink and turn the house into a veritable shambles. There are wives who nag and henpeck night and day. But I needn't add, not wives who will read this page, and their endless groanings would exhaust the patience of Job. Indeed, if I remember rightly, Job's wife was not the least of the trials which befell him. I have known of a husband to come in at evening time, sit by the fire after tea to read or smoke or chat or play with the youngsters, and at last stand up, put his hat on his head, and walk out in sheer desperation, no longer able to endure the nagging tongue of his wife. No, I'm not prejudiced in men's favor, and you'll see that as we go along. But after making every allowance, it is absolutely necessary to insist that the wife or husband who complains thus should sit down and seriously and honestly examine his own or her own conscience. For it is beyond question that there are exaggerations, and that blame is often most unfairly and most unevenly distributed. Who's to blame? Here is a wife who tells you that the husband takes no interest whatsoever in the home or children. He doesn't give her enough money, though she knows he earns it, to run things properly. He's never in at night till all hours, and 'tis many a Saturday night since he came home sober, and many a Sunday morning since he was up in time for Mass. Admittedly, he does go to the sacraments occasionally, and sometimes she came upon him kneeling down to say his prayers. But she bewails her foolishness and blindness in ever marrying him. She never thought he would be so selfish, so lazy, so ill-tempered. Once again be it said that there are cases where these complaints are fully justified, and where the poor broken-hearted wife and mother merits the full weight of our sympathy and practical help. But there are times, too, when she forgets all about the other half of the story. Let husband say his say now, and he will challenge her to deny that for the first year or two after marriage, he was a model. He handed up every penny of his hard-earned wages. He never looked for any other company than hers, and as the little children came along, it was his delight to spend the evening with them. He was keen on improving the home, painting that little fence or papering the rooms, or getting the best yield from their small garden. He was always in time for Mass and most regular at his sodality Holy Communion. He never drank, never at least to excess. In her heart she knows, in the case we have in mind, that he is speaking nothing except the truth. And what brought about this lamentable change of front? Well, the man who loved home returned in the evening to find no decent meal awaiting him. His wife was untidy, nothing was clean, the youngsters were in rags and unwashed. Naturally, husband began first to think and then to ask what was being done with his hard-earned savings. There's no return for them that he can see. So next time he is invited by a fellow worker to have a drink on his way home, the thought of the warmth and pleasant company of the public house contrasts violently with the abode where he hears nothing but a wail, where everything has grown distasteful to him. No need to paint the picture in more lurid colors. But, dear wife, do please search your own heart and soul before you begin to expatiate upon his iniquities. We have freely admitted that there are cases where he is indeed the tyrant you say. But it is also most true that many a well-intentioned husband or father is driven to seek outside the cleanliness and comfort he would far rather have under his own roof. But he knows he won't get them there, and the fault is his wife's. 2 working men were sitting on the side of the road having their lunch during the midday break. "Not much substance in this, father," said one of them in reply to a friendly comment made by a priest who was passing by, and he held up for inspection in his right hand a cup of tea, and in his left a chunk of wartime bread. "No," said the priest, "but I hope you'll do better when you go home this evening." "Hope so too, father," he grinned, "but it all depends on the wife's humor." What she says. Be it added that it is no easy matter to get a wife to admit, even to herself, that she is to blame. I have known such wives to wax as eloquent about their own virtues as about his vices. Such a wife will assure you she never gave him cause to grumble, that she was a model housekeeper, an expert cook, a dutiful wife, and a loving mother. All this she will aver with the greatest volubility, and you will be inclined to believe her, unless you take the trouble to investigate for yourself and hear what the husband or father has to say. The truth very probably is that there are faults on both sides, And if union and harmony are to be restored, there is need of humble admission from wife and from husband that each has contributed their share to the disturbances in the home. Then let bygones be bygones and start again. Let husband give her another chance and see if she won't manage money somewhat better. Let wife understand that he expects warm meals, that he wants to see you looking your best now, just as he did in those days when he and you first met. You were so careful about your appearance then, weren't you? Suppose you exercise some of that same care now and watch for the happy results. If you know he has good reason for complaining about uncleanliness, spend in sweeping and cleaning and polishing some of the hours hitherto consumed in discussing his shortcomings with Mrs. Next Door. Have a smile of welcome for him when he comes in the evening. Let him hear you singing or humming the song you know he likes as you busy yourself over the fire, getting ready his evening meal. For, once more, happiness in the home and union between the members does not just happen. It has to be planned and systematically cultivated. If it has been lost or lessened in your home, it can be restored, first by mutual agreement to forgive and forget each other's past mistakes, and secondly by each admitting your share in the mischief and each now doing your part to remedy it. Sharing the burdens. Nor is it necessary for the disruption of this spirit of union that the partner in marriage be so evidently to blame as the man who is a slave to drink, or the wife who neglects to keep the home together. There is a somewhat different type of husband and father whose offense is not so patent. You know the husband who in very many respects is excellent. He works hard and gives all he can to the support of the family. He frequents the sacraments regularly. He sees to it that his children do the same, and he provides for them the best educations his means will allow. But in spite of all this, and more of the same kind, there is a serious lacuna. For it seems, to judge from his conduct, that he regards hours off as given to him for the exclusive purpose of enjoying himself outside the family circle. To the wife is assigned, in this man's code, the task of keeping the home and rearing the children. His business is to supply her with the money to do so. So when he comes in at the evening time, he is always impatient to be out again. Tea is polished off in 10 minutes, and then he is up the stairs to groom himself. Tonight he is going to the dogs, he informs his wife and children as he closes the hall door behind him and lets himself out into the street. Last night it was a smashing fine picture. Tomorrow is Sunday or bank holiday, and he and a few pals have arranged to meet and go to the big hurling match. And where do his wife and children come in? All day long she is at home. Surely she has claim on him for something more than his salary. Does it never occur to him that she might like to be invited to a show, or that she might reasonably expect him to go for a walk on Sunday afternoon with 2 or 3 of the kiddies and give her a breathing space? Does he think so very poorly of his own wife and children that their company cannot satisfy him for even one evening in the week? Now mark, it is often husbands who are excellent in other ways who slip up here. They do not drink to excess, they practice their religion, but don't they fail much to contribute to the spirit of love and union so characteristic of the little family at Nazareth? Let me round off this section with a few paragraphs about a word of appreciation, a most useful asset and contribute to happiness at home. It's a great pity if it be left unsaid, and sheer thoughtlessness is a poor excuse to offer by way of extenuation. It is our business, quite deliberately, to go out of our way in order to remember. Perhaps a few typical examples will best serve to illustrate what we mean. Your little girl, age 6, brings her exercise home from school and looks forward eagerly all the afternoon till you return after your day's work. She has secured full marks, a large 10 out of 10, written across the page in unmistakable characters, and by the principal teacher's own hand, too. The child runs delightedly to show it to you the moment she hears your latchkey click in the hall door. In itself, it is of small importance, but it assumes huge dimensions in the child's little world. And you, the father, how do you regard it? Oh, you are tired or preoccupied or worried about that deal. You barely glance for a split second at the open page, then hand it back, tell your little one to run off and play in the back garden, and call to your wife to ask if tea is ready. And away goes the child, her face clouded, and I'm afraid on the verge of tears. You forgot the tiny word of appreciation which would have made all the difference. And yes, your excellent wife has the kettle humming, and by fair means or foul she has managed to secure a very limited supply of real white flour. Here is a treat in these days, a beautiful white cake, and you often said you longed for the sight and the taste of it. But tonight you have no comment to make. You do not seem to notice as you munch away in silence, or if you do, it is only to say that the brown tastes just as well, and you suspect that this is not the genuine article. Perhaps she won't reply, but I'm thinking there is a soreness felt somewhere all the same. And, dear woman of the house, for goodness sake, do not choose this most unpropitious moment to broadcast your woes. If the maid has walked out, this is not the time to make the announcement to him. If darling 7-year-old Willie has used Daddy's umbrella and best hat to play soldiers with disastrous results to both, don't you tell Daddy now. If you felt the day long and lonely, and you had been looking forward in the evening to a happy gathering which now is clearly off, wait till another time to say so. And as for nagging, if in ordinary circumstances it is most objectionable, tonight it would be a little short of calamitous. So, dear wife, if you happen to know any woman lacking thus in tact and circumspection, perhaps you'd pass on this little book to her. Word of appreciation. As she sits there at the table, dear husband, your wife is wearing a new pullover knitted by herself. Oh, will you notice it and tell her she is marvelous to have secured the thread when you were assured it was impossible to buy? Or she has put up new curtains. Can't you say that they give the room a cozy, cheery aspect? Or she has painted the windows, or blackleaded the grate, or put a new shade on the electric lamp. Open your eyes, please, and see it, and voice and smile your approval. And to speak again to the wife, if he has taken the pledge and kept it for 3 months, and now Christmas is drawing perilously near, don't forget to say the cheering word of encouragement and appreciation in good time. He is going to daily Mass and Holy Communion, and he has joined the sodality? Thanks be to God. And won't your eyes and your lips and your whole bearing give evidence of your delight and of your confidence that he is certainly going to persevere? It's a valuable asset to foster union and happiness, the little word of appreciation. Finer Femininity quote for the day. Happiness in marriage must be earned. It is something you must work out for yourself, chiefly by forgetting yourself and serving others. No marriage is a success unless you make it so, and that takes persistent effort and, still more, a constant and humble reliance on God. And that was Father Lawrence G. Lavosic from the Catholic Family Handbook. Thank you for tuning in today. Come and visit me at my Finer Femininity website. I have a Facebook page too where I share with you inspirations of all kinds. I also have lots of beautiful handcrafted items in my Meadows of Grace shop. Look for those links in the description below. May God bless you and Our Lady cover you with her mantle. Saint Anne, pray for us.